This is the story of a man who went through a lot before tasting success, but eventually set a stepping stone for other businesses. This video will cover everything about Andrew's life and the shocking yet slightly mind-boggling things he did to acquire a net worth of over $310 billion. Andrew Carnegie battled a lot. You might wonder what kind of difficulties he encountered and, more importantly, how he overcame them. Let's see if you can guess all that and how much he accumulated and dispersed before the end of this video. Andrew Carnegie is a well-known name in American commerce. He was one of the wealthiest merchants of the 19th century, and his tenacity and success established the bar for business for decades. One of his sayings was, "People who are unable to motivate themselves must be content with mediocrity, no matter how impressive their other talents." Andrew Carnegie encountered difficulties as he worked toward his goals, before becoming one of the richest men in the world and one of his era's most prominent benefactors. With a net worth of $310 billion at the height of his career, adjusted for inflation. On November 25, 1835, Andrew Carnegie was born in Dunfermline, Scotland. Despite having no formal schooling, Carnegie grew up in a family that valued reading and education. Carnegie, who was born to a handloom weaver, went on to become one of the richest industrialists in America. At the age of 12, Carnegie's family immigrated to America. In Allegheny, Pennsylvania, where Carnegie began working as a factory worker for $1.20 a week, they established themselves as residents. The Army recruited Andrew Carnegie into the American Civil War in 1864. Rather than serving, he bribed another man $850 to report for duty in his place. Though it may appear dishonest today, it was a typical practice back then. Carnegie's actions were entirely legal. The Conscription Act, approved by Congress the previous year, provided explicit exemptions for individuals conscripted in exchange for a commutation fee. Andrew Carnegie then gained the notice of Pennsylvania Railroad Company Superintendent Thomas Scott while working at the Ohio Telegraph Company. Carnegie progressed quickly through the ranks of the corporation, eventually succeeding Scott as superintendent of the Pittsburgh division. Rather than being resentful, Scott opted to assist Carnegie in launching his investment career. Carnegie wasted no time in deciding what to do when Scott informed him of the planned sale of 10 shares in the Adams Express Company. His mother, Margaret, mortgaged their home to earn the $500 needed to purchase the shares. The risk paid off. Dividends began to flow swiftly, allowing Carnegie to fund a succession of subsequent investments, including the Keystone Bridge Company and Union Iron Mills, to name a few. Carnegie rose from $1.20 per week to $50,000 per year by the age of 30, thanks to his hard work, risk-taking mentality, and the success of his investments. The Carnegie Steel Company was founded in 1892 by Andrew Carnegie using the money from his investments. Due to innovative production techniques, Carnegie was able to rule the industry and accumulate his enormous wealth, and the fact that he owned everything he required during each phase of the production process. The Johnstown flood of 1889, which claimed 2,209 lives, is alleged to have been brought on by the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, of which Carnegie was one of more than 50 members. Carnegie's business partner, Henry Clay Frick, established the exclusive South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club above Johnstown, Pennsylvania, at the advice of his friend, Benjamin Ruff. Frick's closest friends, Andrew Mellon, his lawyers, Philander Knox and James Hay Reed, as well as Frick's business partner, Carnegie, were all among the 60 or so members of the club, which was made up of the top businessmen in western Pennsylvania. The South Fork Dam was first constructed by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania between 1838 and 1853 as a part of a canal system to be used as a reservoir for a canal basin in Johnstown. Carnegie contributed early capital to the Venango County, Pennsylvania-based Columbia Oil Company in 1864. The farm produced almost $1 million in cash dividends in a single year, and oil from nearby wells was successfully sold. Pittsburgh became a hub of wartime production because of the demand for iron goods like gunboat armor, cannons, and shells, among 100 other industrial goods. Together with others, Carnegie built a steel rolling plant, and his wealth came from controlling the steel business and producing steel. Before the war, Carnegie made some investments in the iron sector. Carnegie quit the railroads after the war to focus on the ironworks industry. One of his quotes was, "If you want to be happy, set a goal that commands your thoughts, liberates your energy, and inspires your hopes." The Keystone Bridge Works and the Union Iron Works were established in Pittsburgh as a result of Carnegie's efforts to create several ironworks. Despite having left the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, Thomas A. Scott and J. Edgar Thompson, who were in charge of it, were still in touch with him. It marks a big step in your development when you come to realize that other people can help you do a better job than you could do alone. He must have used his quote to utilize his relationship with the two men to win business for his Keystone Bridge Company and the rails that his ironworks produced. Pennsylvania was his best client, and he also handed Scott and Thompson stock in his companies. He made a point of naming his first steel plant after Thompson when he constructed it. As the owner of the largest integrated iron and steel enterprises ever owned by a single person in the United States, Carnegie made his wealth in the steel sector. One of his two greatest inventions was the Bessemer process, which enabled the high carbon content of pig iron to be burned away during the production of steel in a controlled and quick manner. This was one of his two great innovations. Bessemer steel was quickly accepted for trains as a result of the decline in steel prices, but it was unsuitable for buildings and bridges. By 1889, American steel production had surpassed that of the UK, and Carnegie owned a sizable portion of it. The J. Edgar Thompson Steel Works in Braddock, the Lucy Furnaces, the Union Iron Mills, the Union Mill, Wilson Walker and County, the Keystone Bridge Works, the Hartman Steel Works, the Frick Coke Company, and the Scotia ore mines were all part of Carnegie's expanding empire. Thompson was the former boss of Carnegie and president of the Pennsylvania Railroad. When the Carnegie Steel Company was established in 1892, Carnegie consolidated his holdings with those of his business partners. Put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket. Another aspect of Carnegie's success was the railroad sector, which not only benefited from the shipment of steel, but also required it for the track. To negotiate rates, the railroad and steel barons worked closely together rather than relying on choices made by free market competition. U.S. trade duties and Carnegie's market manipulation both benefited the steel industry. To keep the advantageous tariffs that allowed him to make millions of dollars every year, Carnegie spent a lot of time and energy lobbying Congress to uphold them. Even though Carnegie made an effort to hide this information, court records that were released in 1900 during proceedings with Henry Clay Frick, the previous chairman of Carnegie Steel, showed how advantageous the tariffs had been for business. Carnegie was 65 years old and contemplating retirement in 1901. To prepare for this, he transformed his business into traditional joint stock organizations. The most significant financial dealmaker in America was a banker by the name of John Pierpont Morgan. He had seen how well Carnegie made money. He envisioned a fully integrated steel sector that would reduce costs, lower consumer prices, increase output, and increase worker wages. To accomplish this, he needed to acquire Carnegie and many other significant producers and combine them into one business to reduce duplication and waste. On March 2, 1901, he settled and established the United States Steel Corporation. It was the first company with a market valuation of over $1 billion in the entire world. The buyout was the largest industrial takeover in American history to date and was conducted in secret by Charles M. Schwab, not related to Charles R. Schwab. Carnegie ended his commercial career once the holdings were integrated into the Morgan-founded United States Steel Corporation. For $303,450,000, his steel-related businesses were purchased out. $225.64 million, or $7.35 billion in 2021, was paid to Carnegie as its portion of this in the form of 5% 50-year gold bonds. On February 26, 1901, he put his signature to the letter committing to sell his stake. The United States Steel Corporation officially concluded the deal on March 2nd, when the organization and capitalization at $1.4 billion, or 4% of the U.S. GDP at the time, of the company were officially submitted. The bonds were to be given in trust to Robert A. Franks, Carnegie's business secretary, and delivered to the Hudson Trust Company of Hoboken, New Jersey, within 2 weeks. Nearly $230 million worth of bonds were physically stored there in a dedicated vault. Some of Carnegie's literary goals were achieved as he continued in business. He corresponded with and knew most of the U.S. presidents, statesmen, and notable writers, as well as the English poet Matthew Arnold, the English philosopher Herbert Spencer, and the American humorist Mark Twain. In 1879, Carnegie built spacious swimming facilities for the residents of Dunfermline, his hometown. Due to his love for the library, one of Carnegie's quotes was, "A library outranks any other one thing a community can do to benefit its people. It is a never-failing spring in the desert." Carnegie donated £8,000 the next year to start the Dunfermline Carnegie Library in Scotland. He donated $50,000 in 1884 to establish the Carnegie Laboratory, a histology lab that is now part of the New York University Medical Center's Bellevue Hospital Medical College. Carnegie traveled to the UK with his family in 1881, including his mother, who was 70 years old. They took a coach tour of Scotland, stopping at various receptions along the way. A trip back to Dunfermline, where Carnegie's mother laid the cornerstone of the Carnegie Library that he founded, was the highlight. Although Carnegie was critical of British society, he did not harbor animosity toward it. On the contrary, one of his goals was to catalyze tight ties between English-speaking peoples. To achieve this, he and Samuel Storey bought several newspapers in England in the early 1880s. All of these publications were to support the overthrow of the monarchy and the creation of the British Republic. His charisma and fortune helped him make many friends in Britain. Following the Spanish-American War, the U.S. appeared ready to annex the Philippines, Guam, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. American colonies were something that Carnegie vehemently opposed. He was so opposed to McKinley's annexation of the Philippines in 1900 that he almost backed William Jennings Bryan. Carnegie tried to set up the Philippines' independence in 1898. The Philippines were bought from Spain by the United States for $20 million when the Spanish-American War came to an end. Carnegie personally offered the Philippines $20 million to buy their independence from the United States to protest what he saw as American imperialism. The proposition, however, was unsuccessful. In his later years, Carnegie focused on philanthropy. From 1901 onward, the focus of the public's interest shifted from Carnegie's cunning commercial acumen, which had allowed him to amass such a fortune, to the public-spirited manner in which he dedicated himself to using it on charitable endeavors. In Triumphant Democracy and Gospel of Fortune, he wrote about his opinions on social issues and the obligations of vast wealth. The remainder of Carnegie's life was devoted to raising money for the public good, as well as promoting improvements in social and educational conditions. He kept thank you notes from people he had assisted in a desk drawer he called Gratitude and Sweet Words. Among his many charitable endeavors, the construction of public libraries in the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and other English-speaking nations was particularly notable. Meetings with benefactor Enoch Pratt encouraged Carnegie to pursue this particular driving interest of his. Carnegie was strongly moved by Baltimore, Maryland's Enoch Pratt Free Library in 1886. He said, "Pratt was my guidance and inspiration." In 1908, Carnegie delegated project management of the library to his staff, under the direction of James Bertram. In Dunfermline, the first Carnegie Library was inaugurated in 1883. He planned to give money to build and outfit the library, but only under the condition that the local government would match that by giving money for the site and an operating and maintenance budget. It is located high above the city, close to the small town of South Fork. The Commonwealth neglected the lake, sold it to the Pennsylvania Railroad, and then sold it once more to private parties as railroads advanced and began to replace canal barge transportation. In 1881, the Southside Fishing and Hunting Club finally acquired ownership of the lake. Speculators had bought the abandoned reservoir before the flood, elevated the lake level, built cottages and a clubhouse, and established the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. They also made shoddy repairs to the old dam. The dam was 931 feet, or 284 meters long, and 72 feet, or 22 meters high. The dam experienced several leaks between 1881, the year the club opened, and 1889, during which time it was primarily mended with mud and straw. The 3 cast iron discharge pipes that once allowed for a controlled release of water were also taken out by a previous owner and sold for scrap. The integrity of the dam had been a subject of some debate, and the leader of the Cambria Iron Works, located downstream in Johnstown, had expressed some reservations. A combination of these repairs, a height reduction, exceptionally high snowmelt, and intense spring rains led to the dam giving way on May 31, 1889, sending 20 million tons of water rushing down the valley as a result. Due to his mother's condition near the end of her life, Carnegie decided against getting married while she was still alive. The 51-year-old Carnegie married Louise Whitfee Old, who was 21 years younger than him, after she passed away in 1886. The couple's lone child was a daughter in 1897, whom they called Margaret after Carnegie's mother. John Pierpont Morgan, or J.P. Morgan, a financier, purchased Carnegie Steel from him in 1901 for $480 million, over 10 years later. In the North American Review, Carnegie wrote a piece titled The Gospel of the Wealth in 1889. He claimed that the wealthy have a moral duty to distribute their money in ways that promote the well and happiness of the common man in this work. Carnegie said, "The man who dies thus affluent dies disgraced," in case there was any lingering doubt about the significance of this. By the time of his passing, Carnegie had given $445 million of his total $475 million of personal fortune to charitable causes. He established several trusts or charitable foundations that helped fund more than 2,500 public libraries around the globe, and many organizations that are still in existence today, such as Carnegie Music Hall and Carnegie Mellon University. At his Shadowbrook residence in Lenox, Massachusetts, Carnegie passed away on August 11, 1919, from bronchial pneumonia. He must have thought about his quote, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced," when he previously donated $350,695,653, about $5.49 billion as of 2021, of his money. His final $30 million was distributed to pensioners, charitable organizations, and foundations after his passing. He was buried in Sleepy Hollow, New York, on the Arcadia Hebron property.